Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Jonasz Lewicki. Russia continues stalling the Ukraine peace process, opting instead for renewed attacks on major cities across the country. Analysts say massive waves of 2,000 drones in a single night might become a possibility in the near future, a chilling forecast reinforced by reports of Moscow sending teenagers to work at drone assembly lines. What tactics should Ukraine use to fend off Russian terror strikes against civilians while also holding the line at the front? Joining us now is Stefan Korshak, senior defense correspondent at the Kyiv Post. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hi, good morning, and thanks for having me.
So first, let's begin with these reports from the Institute of the Study of War. 2,000 drones in a single night. That might soon become reality for Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities. Do you think that Ukraine and its allies have the capacity to fend off waves of suicide UAVs like this?
Well, they have the capacity, but they need to get the equipment in place, and it's not there yet. The way that the Ukrainians deal with these drones is through a layered defense that goes down to groups of guys on pickup trucks rigged with machine guns to the most advanced anti-aircraft missiles. And Ukraine has a big airspace, and the Russians are good at finding gaps in the Ukrainian defenses. So theoretically, given enough equipment and firepower, they can shut down their airspace, but they don't have that. So it's a question of how much more material Ukraine can get to do that.
It's also about innovation, isn't it? Because Ukraine has already devised a new way of dealing with these drones. Namely, it produces smaller, nimbler drones that can intercept them mid-air. But it's a question of being able to manufacture those interceptor drones in large quantities, right?
Certainly, and it's not just scaling up the production of those drones. The operators have to be trained. The watch network that's going to deliver information to the operators needs to be trained, well, actually created and trained to that scale. And we're talking about a nationwide effort in a country, well, the size of Germany, roughly. And so simply having interceptor drones on hand is a step in the right direction. But it's a major, multi-layered, complex defense effort that is in progress, and there really aren't any silver bullets.
What about supply chains? There are reports that China has redirected the supply of drone parts, which were originally going into Ukraine as well, into Russia. So effectively, Russia is getting all those components necessary to manufacture drones in large quantities, and they are found in drones which are then shot down over Ukrainian territory. So the question is first, what to do about the Chinese involvement there? And the second one, can the West actually replace the influx of Chinese parts that Ukraine would have otherwise used to produce its own drones?
Well, to take your second question first, personally, I doubt that, because what we're talking about is mass production of drone components, and the West really isn't competitive with China at this point in time. The Ukrainians say that they are now capable of manufacturing all the components for drones, and it's a question of scale. So they also, it's not just, the Chinese aren't just supplying the Russians with drone components, they're doing the same thing for the Ukrainians. The Chinese cutoff of drone components to Ukraine when invoked really didn't affect Ukrainian capacity to produce drones, because they still use a lot of Chinese components. It's because we're talking about components that are effectively a commodity. So if they don't go through, let's say, directly from China, they'll go through the Baltic states or through, I don't know, Dubai or Turkey or some place like that. And I've had drone manufacturers tell me that they really are not concerned about losing access to Chinese drone components. It's really more a question of resources to purchase the components, people to construct the drones, and the resources necessary to do that at big scale.
So now, speaking of scale, Russia clearly is using the advantage of scale on the front lines. It's sending thousands of troops into the meat grinder, losing them in very large numbers, and yet it is actually making those slow territorial gains as time goes by. Does Ukraine, and again its allies, do they have an answer to this sort of strategies, given that Russia has a huge reserve of manpower still available?
I'll speak about the Ukrainians and leave it to it becomes a political question as to what resources the West might be able to deploy to the front. The Ukrainians say that they are fully capable of setting up what they call a line of death based on drones, but also using artillery and mortars and other strike systems that effectively could shut down the entire sector of the front and make it impossible for anything to pass. Further, they say that they have set this up and it's operating in sectors of the front, so not across the entire line, but essentially where the Ukrainians choose or are able to concentrate drone units and artillery, the Russians simply can't move forward, or when they do, 30 men will go forward and 2 will survive, and then they will get hunted down by drones over the next two or 3 days. So it becomes for the Ukraine, and from the Ukrainian point of view, it's a question of making it so that that ability to stop the Russians in limited sectors is implemented across the front. And they say that that is first and foremost a question of quantity of munitions, and then it's manpower to be able to fly the drones, operate the observation equipment, and so on. Western assistance to that, I mean, unless the West can give the Ukrainians more infantry, really that's the key for the Ukrainians, and the West isn't going to do that. So it's not really as much a material problem as it is a manpower problem for the Ukrainians to do that across the front. But they say that technically it's possible.
So Ukraine has also made major advances when it comes to technology, when it comes to new types of weapons developed essentially domestically, using the capabilities within the Ukrainian defense industry. Do you expect this to change the course of the war in the near future? For example, through long-range strikes against supply lines and critical targets within Russian territory?
The direct answer, I would say, is yes, but it's a nuanced yes. The war has been going on for quite a while, and there have been many technological advances by both sides, and so there really is the time when a certain advance would create a major change in the state of the fighting probably is gone. I mean, there's just the leading edge of military technology right now is here in Ukraine, and the advances are coming so fast that both armies are pretty well adapting to a new kind of military technology. So it's a question of direction and influence. If the Ukrainians were to become even more efficient in stopping Russian attacks, then at a certain point, perhaps, the losses would create morale problems for the Russians. Were the Ukrainians to have even more long-range strike drones, and this is something the West could help with, then certainly there could be more inconvenienced travelers in Moscow, more Russian oil and gas refineries shut down, more Russian rail lines broken, and all of that is in the Ukrainian national interest. But where is the point that would force the Russians to reevaluate their strategy? No one really can say. So it's a question of material. The more you put into it, the more you're going to get an effect down the line. But when exactly that effect will come and in what form is very difficult to say.
Now, some people are adopting this simplistic approach, saying, look, Russia has industrial facility based thousands of kilometers away from Ukraine, such as the tank manufacturing plant in Nizhny Tagil. That's beyond the Ural Mountains. And there is no way to reach them. And so Russia is always going to win because it's always going to have reserves positioned way beyond the front lines. Is this sort of analysis still valid given the developments in technologies and approaches that we've recently seen, such as, for example, Operation Spiderweb conducted by Ukrainian forces in Russia itself?
No, yes, of course. I mean, that's the textbook answer. But I fully agree. But the real issue is it's a major conventional war where death and destruction are the metrics by which success takes place or failure takes place. So sure, the Russians can set up a factory, let's say in Siberia, and that will be outside of the a range of most Ukrainian systems to attack, but really the fact that that factory is functioning is not nearly as important as to what effect whatever it is that's being manufactured in that factory would have on the front line. And the Russians I think it's safe to say for the past 3 or 4 months, for practical purposes, have stopped using armored vehicles in their attacks. I mean, there are outliers, there are rare incidents, but it's a huge change if you think about it for a second, that the Russian army has given up on using tanks. So, okay, if that's the case, and this is basically a result of the Ukrainian capacity with attack drones. If that's the case, then how important is it for Russia to have a tank factory outside of the range of Ukrainian attack if the tanks themselves are not useful on the battlefield anymore? Practically speaking, you can still find them, but they're rare.
That's a very important point. One quick question. There are reports that the drone manufacturing facility in Alabuga in Russia actually has teenagers helping assemble these drones. What impact did it have? I mean, is Russia trying to use these kids as human shields effectively?
I don't think so. I think that probably the Russians simply I mean, I don't know, but the standard template would be that the Russians are training engineers and engineering students, and the central personnel dispatch system chose to take a certain number of those students and simply place them in the factory, and by that give them on the job training and create production capacity, or more exactly labor for production capacity. I mean, certainly from the point of view of Russian soldiers, there's really not much concern shown by the national leadership in terms of protecting its people. I mean, that's just not a priority for them by and large.
No, the International Labour Organization actually says that even if someone is above the age of 15, if they are placed in a compromising position like that, it still could qualify as child labour effectively.
There's no question of that, and were somebody to attempt to prosecute that, then there might well be a case. From the perspective of the war, however, there's so much death and destruction that the labor relations deep inside of Russia is just not as big a priority. You've got bombs slamming into Ukrainian apartment buildings. I mean, just today there was a strike that hit in Kramatorsk, and for the Ukrainians that would be a worse crime if you were to ask the average Ukrainian, I would say.
It most certainly is. It just shows the cynicism of the Russian leadership, pertains both to Ukrainians and also to the Russians themselves. Stefan Korshak was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thanks for having me. You have a great day.
And I'm Jonasz Rowiński. You're watching TVP World. Please stay with us for more latest news and updates.